Good
Hi,
evening.
good evening. How are you?
I'm doing well. Hope you are too.
I'm fine, thank you. So, welcome to Reinvent. We're happy to have you here. We're very excited to hear the topic you have on hand. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and introduce you to the audience. You can go ahead and get your screen share set up, and then I'll hand it over to you.
Good.
Okay, so we have with us Shweta Chawla. She's the founder and chief investigator at SC Cyber Solutions. She's going to be talking about the cause and effect of the importance of digital forensics to penetration testing and incident response. Okay, so we have another forensic investigator with us. So, Naveed, please keep your laptop handy. We might need to give it to Shweta for investigation as well. Now, a little bit about Shweta. Shweta is an independent digital forensic investigator with nearly 15 years of experience in digital forensic and cyber investigations. She heads her own forensic investigation firm, SC Cyber Solutions in Pune. She has been a consultant to various police departments in investigations into cybercrimes, in addition to handling private cases for individuals and corporates. Shweta also conducts training workshops for corporate banking and government institutes like Symantec, Oracle, Savitribai Phule Pune University, the Reserve Bank of India, the Maharashtra Police Academy, the Telangana State Police, the Indian Air Force Defense Services Staff College at Wellington, and the headquarters, Southern Command. She is a regular guest faculty at CDAC Pune and NIBM. Shweta is an invited member of the prestigious International High Technology Crime Investigation Association, as well as of the Cyber Investigation Analysis Standard Expression, CASE community. She has been a speaker at conferences like Grace Hopper Conference India, and she's a founder president of the Association of Women in Information Security. Wow, Shweta, that's an impressive profile. And we're all very excited to hear your thoughts on the topic you have chosen. With that, over to you. All the best.
Thank you, Aditya. And thank you to the Rocheston team. It's my pleasure to be part of Reinvent 2021. And good evening to everyone. I am based in India, so based in Pune. So it's evening for us here, unlike the two speakers we had earlier. And I enjoyed listening to both of them. I've been following Erdel for quite a while. And like Ivy, I've been reading his book. So, but I doubt that I have the skills or the patience to be a penetration tester. So the topic I have picked is something that stems out of the investigations that we have been doing. And I believe that pretty much all that we do in cybersecurity is a study of cause and effect. And the causes vary, the effects vary depending on the scale. You will have a whole bunch of changes that occur. You'll have sometimes a very minor cause leading to a very major effect, or something really major leading to a very minor effect. And soon you will have the effect leading to the next cause. So it often is a study of a cause, an effect, that effect going back and leading to a cause. And so you have an action, you have a reaction, you have a reaction leading to another action, and this chain can continue throughout. So what I will be largely speaking about is this cause, effect, reaction, and action. And causality of any kind is basically the effect of an event, a process, an environment, an object, an insertion, which changes the state or which leads to the creation of another event, another process, another product, another state, another environment. And it's not very difficult to do. It's sometimes something minor, sometimes something major, but all cause that we have, most often, particularly from the cybersecurity perspective, stems from one simple thing. And so to quote the Bible, I'm going to say that greed is the root of all evil. Here, when I say greed, it is not in any religious terms at all. The biblical connotations of it apply just there to the quotation. But beyond that, I am talking about greed, motive, agenda for causing some event, for causing some incident, for just doing something. And that greed, that motive is different for different agencies. That greed could be economic, it could be social, it could be political, it could be emotional, it could be psychopathy, it could be sociopathy, it could be jealousy, it could be something as simple as, I am bored and so let's do something. It could be, I don't like the world, I don't like this company, I don't like the owner of this company, I don't like the people of this company, I don't like the political opinion this company has. Or it could be, poor me, nobody likes me. It could be, the world is against me, so I'm going to take it out on a whole bunch of people. I could be taking it out on a government agency, I could be taking it out on individuals, I could be finding victims online and trolling them. It could be pretty much anything. But I'm largely going to be speaking from the perspective of organizations. And when we have this kind of greed causing something, it very often is a study of what can it cause? How much harm can it cause? And for an organization, we know that the harm can have tremendous effects. We know that the harm can, in some cases, lead to an organization shutting down. Hopefully not, but there are ways to preempt this. And the first way to preempt this is penetration testing. We know that something is going to happen. We know there are unfriendlies out there who are going to look for ways to affect my system, who are going to look for ways to bring down my system, bring down my application, bring down my network. They are going to look for ways to hamper my organization. And because they are going to do that, my job as a penetration tester, or the role of penetration testing in any organization, is to preempt this kind of attack, is to believe that, yes, an attack is going to happen, and how well can I simulate an attack? How well can I look at the multiple causes that could occur that will eventually mitigate the effects, that will reduce the effects? And as Erdal has been saying, you've got all kinds of pen testing teams. You've got the red team, which pretends to be unfriendly. You have the blue team, which is the friendlies. And you are working to secure your organization as well as you possibly can. Still, at some point of time, an incident will occur. And so you have your incident response teams that come in, and their job is very, very simple in one level. Their job is to put out the fire. Now, anyone who has ever had anything to do with an incident of any kind knows that the job is not as simplistic as it seems to be. The job is, in fact, much, much more complex. The job is to react calmly, react quickly, react correctly, with the intention of minimizing the damage that the incident has caused. Limit the damage, minimize the consequences, limit the amount of time that it takes for you to actually go back into operations. How quickly can the organization be up and running again? How effectively can the organization be up and running again? And when we are looking at these kinds of effects that can happen to an organization, what needs to be identified is the causes that occur to lead to this kind of an effect. What set it off? And finally, root cause analysis and corrective action are the two major things that both penetration testing and incident response deal with. Their entire aim, their entire purpose for being is to identify loopholes, identify vulnerabilities, look for ways of exploiting these vulnerabilities, and prevent these vulnerabilities from being exploited. But sometimes it happens. And so we end up with incident response doing the firefighting, and then digital forensics typically coming into play, which says, okay, incident happened. Let's go now into documenting this incident. Let's go into identifying the perpetrators of the incident. And there, very often, you end up with an overlap between both digital forensics and penetration testing and digital forensics and incident response. I'll take them one at a time. And when we are looking at digital forensics and penetration testing, it isn't so easy to explain why there is an overlap. There is an overlap, but where digital forensics typically has a role is, one, digital forensics looks at multiple incidents from multiple perspectives. Like Erdal was saying, it's often that the red team and the blue team don't speak to each other, but the communication needs to happen through other agencies within the organization or through different levels of the organization. And very often that communication gap is bridged by digital forensics and reports that come back. So digital forensic investigative reports need to be made available to penetration testing teams. Digital forensics reports and digital forensic findings need to be identified, and maybe you don't, of course, present the entire report across the team because forensic reports are finely confidential, but the findings of those reports are essential because you end up with penetration testing finally looks at imagining a potential attack. And sometimes you have attacks that are well beyond our imagination. It's only after you do a full forensic examination that you realize this is how the attack happened. And you end up with sometimes a major surprise. Sometimes you say, oh, I didn't realize an incident could actually occur in this manner. And this is sometimes the entire team not being able to realize it. So digital forensics goes into recognizing attacks, into identifying attacks, into then being able to label these attacks and make these attack vectors known to the penetration testing teams. The penetration testing teams can then take those, test them against existing applications, against future applications, against the network as a whole, so that you have this constant cycle of vulnerabilities that are coming up both from the incident response team and from the forensics team being provided to the penetration testing team, who can then make sure that those are patched as well. So digital forensics bridges this gap between the unknown and the known and helps identify additional attack vectors. You also have the specifics of digital forensic skills that come up that can be useful for penetration testing. Digital forensics finally is a study of law. It is a study of identifying evidence, of collecting evidence, of preserving evidence, and of presenting evidence. And that presentation and collection and preservation is always from a legal perspective. It's always from the point of view of how are you going to win the case in court. So with that, digital forensics comes with a detailed understanding of the legalities. So your penetration testing teams will definitely benefit with additional legal knowledge. What can be done? How can this be patched? If this is patched in this manner, is it going to affect somebody's rights, somebody's duties? Is it going to step on some legal loophole? Is it going to create a legal loophole? You also have the entire procedure, the standards, the protocols that exist that are ingrained into digital forensic investigators. And those often end up being very useful for the penetration testing team. You have the mechanisms in digital forensics, the procedures in digital forensics that help with access and with understanding, with extracting, with interpreting the evidence that can be present in multiple different devices. Let's give you an example. We know that vehicles today come with a whole series of data collection points. Those data collection points can be compromised in many different ways. Those data collection points can be, we know that there were attacks that were carried out and demonstrated in DEF CON, where the Bluetooth of a music system within a vehicle was compromised. And because that was compromised, they could gain access to other aspects of the vehicle. We know that vehicles keep information. We know that you have voice-activated music systems that can respond, that can collect information. Can that information be used to compromise your organization? Digital forensics goes into extracting this information, goes into collecting this and interpreting it. It looks for information about where you traveled, because these days your music systems connect straight to your locations, and it tells you this is the route you took, this is the path that you follow, this is the path you follow every day. If that pattern is established, that pattern can definitely be compromised. And digital forensics studies patterns. Digital forensics looks for correlations, looks for commonalities, looks for patterns across multiple different things. So that's where it can often aid penetration testing. Digital forensics also helps incident response. And for most organizations, your digital forensics and incident response teams are common, or at least there is a large overlap between the two teams. You have digital forensic teams that, by their nature, need to respond rapidly, need to work then and prevent the damage that is being caused. They very often do not have the time or the inclination to go into preservation of evidence. And so what very often happens is that you end up with evidence being compromised, evidence being lost because the incident response team was just not able to deal with that at that point of time. Incident response is finally like firefighting. Digital forensics, on the other hand, is more like an arson investigation. Why did the fire occur? What was the cause of the fire? What started it off? While incident response looks at, okay, fire has occurred, let's put this fire out, let's reduce the damage to life, limb, and property, and then we will go into identifying what started the fire off. Digital forensics starts with what caused the fire, and then goes off into identifying how the fire occurred, what led to the fire reaching the extent that it reached. Was it arson? Was it an accident? What are your data points that lead to evidence? How can this arson then be proved in court? And well, one of the cases that we did a long time ago is basically what started off this cause and effect reaction in my brain. And this was a number of years ago when we had an incident. This organization was breached severely. They lost a whole bunch of their client databases, and they were not able to get it all back as quickly as they could. This was, fortunately for them, not a ransomware attack. And at that point of time, they decided, okay, we've had a breach, let's get up and running as quickly as we can. And sure, we would like to investigate what caused this. By the time they got around to calling the investigators in, it was 6 months later. And in those 6 months, there was so much loss of evidence that occurred because preservation of evidence finally was not done. The incident response team's brief was get us back up and running as quickly as you can. Clients should have the least effect. Clients should face the least damage, get us back up and running, which the incident response team handled beautifully. They were up and running in less than 12 hours, but the evidence was compromised. And eventually, by the time we were called in, by the time we carried out the investigation, we found the evidence was just not sufficient to try the perpetrator in court. Eventually, we did get to the perpetrator, but it just wasn't enough. And so you end up with digital forensics helping both penetration testing and incident response, first in the documentation stage, Second, at the legalities stage. Third, with the procedures and policies that are laid out. And fourth, with just being able to preserve evidence, just being able to maintain the integrity of the evidence, which finally is paramount if a case goes to court. With that, you have what I like to call the evolutionary process, which is, it starts off with penetration testing. We know a vulnerability exists. We know an exploit exists. We test it out. We test for other exploits. We test for other vulnerabilities. While that is happening, maybe a vulnerability that we did not know about is exploited. It leads to an incident. All of this is the cause for digital forensics. And you end up with digital forensics being carried out. Digital forensics being carried out leads to the next stage, which is data from the digital forensics being much more useful for the next penetration testing that is carried out. So the investigation of the incident response and the investigation carried out by digital forensics leads to the next penetration testing being much more robust, being much more holistic. Of course, as we all know, there is nothing like 100% security. We cannot have it. Vulnerabilities will exist, will get exploited, but the next exploit is going to be different from the one that happened earlier. Again, we go back into that incident response being the effect for the next, being the cause for the next digital forensics. And this is an evolutionary cycle that goes on. Each new incident, each new study of exploits, each new study of vulnerabilities, each new attempt to secure your organization in whatever way it is, will lead to better incident response, will lead to better digital forensics. And each investigation leads to much better penetration testing because you know what to look for. You know that, okay, attacks are evolving in this manner. Every year, beginning of the year or end of the previous year, we have anticipated trends in cybersecurity for the next year. And that is a study that comes out from investigations. That is a study that comes out from breaches that have already occurred. So each is a cause for the other. The effect of each is the cause for the next. And so you have this constant evolution that goes on and makes it much more effective, leads to much more effective, much more robust security across your organization, and eventually across multiple organizations as a whole. So that's it for me. I am open for questions, Aditya, if there are any.
Okay. Hi, Shweta.
Hi, Aditya.
So, first off, I would like to say that was very concisely and precisely explained. You took your time with the topics, explained it very clearly, made it very easy for everyone to understand. Okay,
That's
so
very kind of you, Aditya.
We do have a couple of questions. Now, the first one would be, how effective and how long will it take to identify an attack through digital forensics findings if there is an attack through dark web resources?
So it would take long both on the incident response side and on the forensic side. The forensics would go into identifying where the breach occurred, what kind of dark web resources were used, potentially go into dark web and investigate it from there. And you would, once you are in the dark web, you would need to basically penetrate that particular group on the dark web.
Okay, so there's a follow-up question that I'm asking to that. How easy would it be to identify someone who is operating solely from on the dark web or using dark web resources? Because of course there are multiple nodal points and things. Yes.
Not very easy, but these days not impossible.
Okay, so what is what would be the success rate when you actually do go after someone hiding behind the dark web?
I'm not going to put a percentage on that.
Okay. The next question is, does digital forensic play the role of disaster management?
To an extent, yes. But I would not say that digital forensics is going to mitigate a disaster? I would say digital forensics is definitely going to manage the disaster in the sense of why did the disaster occur? How do we tabulate the damage caused by the disaster? How do we go back and possibly find traces that tell you who caused the disaster? So sure, from that perspective, yes, it's important for disaster management, but I would not say that forensics is disaster management.
Okay, so it's more for learnings to prevent future disasters.
Yes, and the management of the disaster would definitely not be in the mitigation of the harm, because forensics finally does not go into mitigating damage. Forensics goes into studying the damage.
Okay, so the next question is how evidence is dealt with in digital forensics and incident response scenarios? Essentially, how is evidence dealt with in incident management and disaster?
With great care, and with one of the greatest things that we are afraid of in forensics is that your evidence is going to be tampered with, that your evidence is in some way going to be compromised. And maintaining the integrity of the evidence is paramount for any investigator.
Okay.
So the first thing and the last thing that we do is deal with the evidence and keep it safe. We've recently had a case in Pune where it's come to us much, much later, where the evidence, when presented in court, is different from the evidence that was collected at the scene of the crime.
Okay.
And it's, of course, led to a whole series of disasters now.
I would think so. Okay.
Yes. So it's been a very interesting case to deal with. We've been called in much later. We've been called in after effectively the disaster has occurred. And the court wants to know what could have gone wrong. So we are busy trying to track that down.
Okay. The next question is, if there is a fresh attack in a system without any precedents, how can pen testing work without past patterns?
So pen testing can't work without past patterns. Pen testing, unless you have a scenario, either the thought out scenario, an imagined scenario, or a scenario that has already occurred earlier, pen testing is not going to be able to pull something absolutely out of the blue and say, yep, let's exploit it.
Okay. Unless you get really lucky.
Yeah, so you have to either imagine it completely. It is like saying that a unicorn exists and we can imagine a unicorn. But if I tell you, okay, there is this four-legged creature which has a tail, which has a couple of horns, which can fly, and sure, what on earth is that? Okay. So pen testing goes into looking at recognized scenarios or recognizable scenarios which can be exploited. Very often, the recognizable scenarios are made available only through forensics.
Okay. The next question is, do pen testers need to learn about digital forensics to effectively mitigate any issues?
I would say no, but it would be nice if pen testers learned about preservation of evidence when they were conducting any penetration tests.
Okay, so it would help the forensic investigator
in due course, yes. So we've got this concept that says forensic readiness, which is a part of a disaster management concept as well, which is that in case an incident occurs, how do you prevent the evidence from being damaged? How do you collect that evidence and maintain its integrity? And pen testers knowing that would be very useful.
Okay.
From both the forensic perspective and the pen testing perspective.
So I think we're done with the questions. So before I let you go, let me ask you a question. Do you paint, Shweta? Because I like the paintings behind you.
I do not paint. Those are all gifts.
Okay. I like the paintings at the back.
To save my life or anybody else's.
Okay. Anyway, they were interesting paintings behind you, so I thought I'd ask.
They are interesting. They are all gifts.
Okay. So thank you so much, Shweta. We loved having you on, and we look forward to having you for the next conference as well. As always, stay safe and have a great rest of the day.
I have a question for you. What dog do you have?
Okay. I realize he's been interrupting the call intermittently. He's a husky.
Oh, he's a husky.
This is not the first all our conferences, he's made his presence known to everybody all around the world. So,
and he should.
He really should. Yes, the last conference, in fact, I was forced to show him on the camera because everyone requested.
Well, I'm actually going to ask you to do that if it's possible.
I don't know where he's going. Hang on, just give me a minute. Just give me a minute. Okay, he's made an appearance. Hang on, let me bring him up.
Dog.
Okay. Oopsie. And there he is.
Oh, he's beautiful.
So, Mako, everyone wants to see you again as usual. There he is. Okay. So, thank you so much, Shweta.
All right. Thank you, Aditya. And thank you
it was a pleasure
to all in the Rocheston team.
Thank you. It was a pleasure having you. As usual, have a great evening and stay safe. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.